maybe some payroll tax reform would be a way to get money. We only had 1.7 million of 30 million businesses in America get PPP money. By giving some kind of rebate on payroll tax, we can get money in the hands of every business out there.
Is there a question in there somewhere for me?
No, I was just making conversation with you, but
Uh,
do you think we need to
I-
figure out a way to get money to more small businesses because the PPP
well,
didn't really work?
Well, no question. Certainly, it worked for some people, not for others. But if the businesses can't reopen, a lot of good it does them to be able to cover their payroll for a month or two. And I'm not downplaying that if you're one of the people that's on the receiving end of that paycheck. But if you are mandated by the government to stay closed, then there's only so much a government loan or even a government grant will do for you. In terms of the payroll tax cuts, um, or the payroll tax holiday, I'm open to it. I mean, obviously, the two problems there are if you have 33 million people out of work, they're not really affected by the payroll tax, right? So it's not giving them more money to spend. And if there's no demand in terms of consumer sentiment, then there's not much of an incentive for a business to hire someone, even if they also get to enjoy the payroll tax holiday. I'd love to see something like a national infrastructure bank and do what President Trump's been talking about since he was a candidate, a massive infrastructure spending program, the likes of which we saw during the Great Depression and the Works Progress Administration. Bottom line is, John, you travel quite a bit, is you see there are bridges, roads, highways, a whole lot more in this country that are crumbling. And if you look at what they've been doing in China and elsewhere, places like Abu Dhabi, it makes us almost look like a minor league country in comparison. Here we have an opportunity with a massive infrastructure spending program to rebuild our country, number one, put people back to work, number two, and give a tremendous jolt to the economy, number three.
Yeah, and going back a couple of months ago, I guess, when the impeachment was going on, or when the Mueller probe came to an end, Trump said, "All right, fine, it's over. Maybe we should do some infrastructure," and the Dems wanted nothing to do with it. You would think a developer like Donald Trump would have some creative ways to get infrastructure moving, and that could help with the jobs. Is is are the Democrats blocking infrastructure, which is one of their key things over the years?
Well, it's a good question. I'm sure if you ask the Republicans on the Hill, they would say it's the Democrats that are blocking it. I'm sure if you ask the Democrats, they would say, look, we came up with a plan. The president didn't want to work with us on it. So I think this partisan bickering in Washington, D.C. is something that I'm certainly tired of. And we're at a time in our country and with our economy that we just don't have time for gridlock. I recognize that 6 months before a presidential election, usually that's when partisanship is at its most hyper partisan, but we don't have time for this right now. I mean, we really need people in both parties, or I'll say all parties, to come together and put the interests of Americans first before the interests of their donors or their political base.
Yeah, and we don't have time for gridlock, and it sure seems like when I watch some of these left-wing media type shows, I don't have time for these fake polls. I mean, we saw the last election; everybody said Donald Trump has no path to victory. All of a sudden, he won. Now today, I see this Quinnipiac poll all over the place talking about how 56% of the people are for Joe Biden and Donald Trump's unfavorables of -25. And then lo and behold, on the bottom it says the poll was of registered voters, and in most of the states they're doing it, like New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Democrats hold a significant lead over Republicans, so the polls are skewed. And it seems like the media is just trying to trick people into thinking that Donald Trump's the problem when the numbers are lying.
Well, look, I don't put a lot of stock in the polls for many reasons. So I'm not getting. Look, I'm a Trump supporter. I'm planning to vote for him again, but I'm not going to get spooked by polls that say one thing or another. And I just think the polling models these days are flawed. Honestly, I don't think it's. I don't think it's worth my effort or my limited amount of time paying attention to them.
Yeah, and every time I bring up polls well in advance of any race, Frankie doesn't want to talk about it. So, and it makes a lot of sense. Most of these polls are Boulder Dash. So, just get frustrated sometimes. I want to talk about it, but we're going to take a quick break right here. Frankie and I are going to come back, bring you more of the news of the day and what's happening out there in the markets, in the world, and maybe we'll talk about General Flynn and Roger Stone and all the craziness that's happening at the highest levels of our intelligence here, when I think many in our intelligence apparatus tried to pull off a silent coup. So we're going to take a quick break. I want to also point out, as I mentioned before, my daughter Tori and her cousin Allie have been doing a charity raffle called Luxury and More. And finally, I won something. I won the mini Keurig, and thank you, Allie and Tori. Check out Luxury and More. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more Liquid Lunch right after this.